So this is going to be a nice short talk. Good morning. Good morning. Just to give you a bit of an introduction to physical literacy and tell you why I do it. And I'm a parent, so that's probably the biggest reason why I do this. Second, I'm a university professor, so I get paid to do it. Canada and Sweden are pretty similar. We have the same values, and that makes it easy to come here and talk to Swedes. The difference is, though, in my country, 95% of adults my age do not meet the minimum physical activity standard. 95%. In your country, you're not even close to that. You're way more protected than Canadians are. The Americans are worse. Can't get much worse than that, though. Why I say that to you is that Sweden's a place that can protect themselves still. We're in treatment mode. And that's a big difference. So that's why I come here, because you're one of the only countries where that might work. Prevention. Anyway, I believe in that. Active for life. How do you set up a kid for their life to actually be active for life? In Canada, it's not working anymore. United States, not working anymore. Trinidad, not working anymore. Wales, not working anymore. Sweden, still got some chances, but you gotta not let culture shift you in a certain way. That graph is a very interesting one because that one shows that physical inactivity, the amount of sedentary behavior you have sitting in front of a screen, doing nothing, relates to all of those different diseases. And this isn't a discussion. There's so much science behind each arrow. There's like hundreds of studies for each arrow, so that breast cancer, prostate cancer, depression, diabetes are all causally linked to physical inactivity. Too much inactivity, you run a really big risk of getting all of those things. We know this because we're literate. We know this because we read and write and do good science, and good science helps us find out these facts. But what's relevant to you guys is that despite us knowing that, it doesn't make us eat well and exercise regularly. The worst thing here is that if you're physically inactive, it'll also influence your mood. If you're depressed, exercise is just as effective as medicine for depression. That's powerful. So you guys, when you leave here today, mental health is just as important as physical health, and they're the same thing. Separating mental and physical health is a bad thing to do nowadays. This is a graph that I use a lot, and for the parents in this room, because it's mostly parents, if you take a slice through this bone right here called the femur, right there, and your child takes less than 3,500 steps a day, that's a gamer all day long. You can see the bone is very thin, and it's got a circular shape. The architecture isn't good, the density isn't good, and it's very thin. If a kid gets a little more activity, 5,000 to 10,000 steps a day, bone gets a little bit better. That makes sense. You become an active kid, which is roughly 10,000 to 16,000 steps a day, that's good bones. But if your kids get 16,000 steps a day or more, that's really good bones. So in Canada, our average step count for Canadians is around 8,000 steps a day for our Canadian children. So they're not bad, but not the category that we want. So the game is, as a parent, how do I get my kids way over there? Because if they get bones like that, the furthest to the your right, then as you age, they won't go to a state where they break. That makes sense? So as a parent, these 6 balls in the air represent the most important things of childhood. That as parents, as society, as the community, we need to help people do. Every child needs to, the word there is self-individualization. Who am I? Kids need to learn, who am I, by what we provide for them. What am I? Who am I? But interestingly enough, later on, what I do is who I am. If you never get outside and never do a lot of activity, that is who you are. Aspiration. I want to be a pilot. I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a circus performer. That's an aspiration. But we have to give them the opportunity to choose. Fun. Probably the most important thing in Canada and the United States that's absent in sport. I love sport. Sport that's fun keeps kids active. We've lost that, definitely in Canada and the United States. There's a good one, trust. Trusting somebody is a very important thing in life, and you need to create an environment that's a safe one, that trust exists. Constructive risk. Most kids, they're afraid of risk. Risk, avoid it. Failure, don't do it. How do you create an environment where kids go, I'm interested in trying things, exploring the world. Here today, this is happening. That's cool. The last one is hard work. Believe it or not, kids actually like hard work when it's constructive. There's good data to say, I like doing things that's cool, that makes me learn, that makes me get better. Just like an adult, that's neat. But instead, you know what we've done? We've bubble wrapped our kids. We've created huge surplus safety around them. Over safety as opposed to adequate safety. We need to give our kids adequate safety, but not a big bubble around them. Because if you put this big bubble around them, you know what happens? They're afraid of risk. They're afraid of failure. They won't explore the world. They can't make decisions for themselves. And that's a major issue going forward. They need to be exposed to risk and have adequate safety, not surplus. This is where physical literacy comes in. Next year in Winnipeg, where I live, Canada, we have the first ever global physical literacy conference in the Human Rights Museum of Canada. That is our most cherished building where I live, and we value human rights as much as Swedes do. And my government has said physical literacy is a human right. Hence, we're there. That's a big statement. I think Swedes like that, Canadians like that. That's a very big statement. Next year in September here, you're going to have the first International Physical Literacy Conference for Europe. That's a huge accomplishment, and I'm super excited for that. The World Health Organization, which tells us what we should do, this year released that document, More Active People for a Healthier World. And the number one action statement in that document, I'm really happy to say, is physical literacy. WHO says, to fix inactivity, make people physically literate. And in Canada, that's our document, let's get moving. It also says that to make people less inactive and more active, the first thing to do is physical literacy. We have a common vision as Canadians, using 5 principles as the foundation of making Canadians active again. The first one is physical literacy. That's a new concept, but it's not. It's 100 years old, this concept. It just never got adopted. This is the Swedish definition, translation of physical literacy. You can read that. I can't. I can actually read it because of the fact that I wrote it. But in the end of the day, all of those words are not special. There's words like confidence, motivation. Those are psychological things. It's not just exercising that counts. It's creating kids that are competent in moving and confident. So if you look at it, here's a competent person. She's confident. She's motivated to move, and she's smiling upside down. Isn't that fun? That is what physical literacy is. It has nothing to do with physical activity. It has everything to do as a parent in creating sport, recreation, physical education that creates children to become competent, confident movers that are happy to move. It's just that simple. This is the cycle. We say that if you develop movement competence in kids, they'll become confident. And if they're confident and competent, they'll be motivated. Let's get doing stuff. And if they're motivated, they'll participate in life. And here's the catch. It is when kids participate, when they participate in things that we do out here, in schools, in sport, in recreation, we had better create a circumstance where they're enjoying themselves and having fun. Fun is the equation of keeping this cycle working. And, see the word there, social connection, that's friendship. The number 1 and 2 reasons why people stay in sport are fun and friendship. 1 and 2, even if you're an Olympic athlete, and you're going to have a couple Olympic athletes here next, with a couple gold medals, they'll tell you that, I guarantee it. Fun and friendship. But that's gone, get rid of activity. We're not here to train hard, yes we are, but we're here to train hard having fun. You can do it with physical literacy. You probably didn't know this. There's been a research study already in Sweden examining physical literacy of Swedish inactive kids, and it confirms everything I just said to you. Whether it's here in Sweden, whether it's in Canada, United States, or Trinidad, the problems are identical. This is Dr. Amanda Visick, and she's the person in the world, the only person in the world to study fun. She's the doctor of fun. Isn't that a great title? Her students who take their master's degree are called masters of fun. She's a good friend of mine. She's coming here to Sweden October 23rd to help Hockey Sweden make hockey fun again. Yay. We need that in Canada too. But what's relevant here, if you look at the list on the right-hand side, she asks hundreds of kids, what's fun to a kid? Not smiles, not about how many smiles you have in a day. That's fun to a kid. This is what kids tell us. Trying hard, being a good sport, having a positive coach, not a negative one, a positive coach. Hey, there's a whole list there that you can see, learning and improving, having friendships, you name it. I ask you that if you go to your sport club, you go to your school, you go to your recreation facility, are all those things happening there? Your job as a parent is actually to confront. If you don't have all of those features in sport, recreation, physical education, and in school, if they don't have them there, why aren't they there? That's the environment where the kids grow. And if they can't develop their physical literacy there, who's going to do it for them? Well, parents have a role for sure. But the important thing is you need to question, are all those things happening in the school? Is that cycle happening in your school? Because if that cycle's broken anywhere, and words, a single set of words can destroy a child's confidence. So our job is to say, hey, in school, are you creating quality physical literacy experiences for my child? Are you? Well, you know what that means? It looks like this. How are you making my kids more competent? How are you making my kids more confident? What are you doing about that? Question it. See if it's happening. Be aware. I'll finish on this one. In Canada, the number of kids that go outside nowadays, alone, without their parents, has gone away. Our children are no longer free-range chickens. They don't go out and play much. This is what's called risky play. Great heights, high speed, dangerous tools, dangerous elements, rough and tumble play, and getting lost. Now parents, don't get scared here. Anybody knows that if they're 4 or 5 years old, and I could do this right here with the kids right back there, if I took these 2 chairs or these 2 stools like this, and I put a blanket over it, a 5-year-old would go under there and get lost. It's not about taking a 5-year-old and putting them in a forest. It's about giving them an opportunity to feel like they're lost. And oh, such great heights. See this first one? Oh, such great heights to a kid. Standing on a chair is oh, such great heights. We're not talking about using chainsaws with kids. Dangerous elements are things like having a spoon and playing with plastic. But if you guys think, parents here, think about the last time you had risky play. Just think about it. Did it involve any one of those? Did it? Think about your risky play. The last time you did it would have been 20 years ago or yesterday or this morning. I guarantee you, at my age, we always did that stuff. Always. One generation later, and now, interestingly enough, if you ask a child what's their greatest fun time in their day, they'll pull out an iPad or a phone. They will not associate with risky play. Free play is the foundation of physical literacy for children. If they're not given an ability to explore the world and explore their abilities, you put them in a great risk. They can't make decisions. They can't spot hazards in the environment. They don't know who's friendly or not. This is an important thing, bringing back free play, or in Sweden, keeping it. Our brains are wired by what we do. Your brain from 0 years of age to 100 changes constantly. It's not like it goes to 21 years of age and stays. It constantly changes. But if you don't move and you don't get in the outdoor world, the way your brain is wired is completely different. Children's brains today in Canada are very different than they were when I was growing up. Perhaps in some ways better, but in more ways not. This is a big deal for us because neurons that fire together wire together, and it creates your identity, who you are. And if who you are is not activity, it's never going to be, or very difficult to get it back. So this isn't just about being exercising. This is about creating people with identities that last for a lifetime, that aren't fragile, that create really good psychology in a person and really good physiology. This guy got it right, this Swede. He was one of the people who actually said, activity is the foundation of happiness. And he's so right, not just for adults, but for children as well. In Canada, this happens where I live 6 months of every year. And every person in society, whether you're my age, 90 or 10, should look at that and not be afraid, but go, let's go, that's fun. Let's run down that. And you know what? I've seen this. I don't know if you have this sport in Sweden. I'm not too sure, but have you seen this one? Have you seen that sport? Do Swedes do good at this sport? I think they compete against Canada pretty well and sometimes win. But to me, that ice surface is fun, not dangerous. But every day in my city, when this happens, 160 people a day break their hip. And if you're my age or older, you die 20% of the time within a year. If you're a curling person and you know how to walk on ice, you clearly don't break your hips. Curling saves lives. Because they create competent, confident movers on ice, whether you're 60 or 20. You cannot learn how to walk on ice unless you walk on ice. And if you are afraid of walking on ice, you stay inside your house for 6 months with no friendships and you get depressed. Fear of falling stops movement. Competency and confidence creates movement. Let's create a new generation of competent, confident movers that can do anything on land, air, ice, snow, water. That's what physical literacy is about. Not getting your exercise every day, but creating competent, confident movers so that these guys can be active for life. That's not scary, that's a wonderful thing. 70-year-olds curling, that's cool. So in the end, physical literacy is about making safety, which I've convinced you about, and active participation. So all our children thrive, not just survive, and all our children can participate in whatever they want to do. Horseback riding, to being a firefighter, to being a sporting athlete, to just having activities of daily living. Thank you very much.
Please stay in.
No, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In Sweden right now, we can sit there. Let's have a chat.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
A chat.
Yeah. In Sweden right now, inclusive physical activity is quite a big thing.
Yeah.
And we are really starting to address gender equality, LGBTI, ethnicity, and of course different kind of disabilities. What is the most important thing for parents to think of when it comes to disabilities?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. Physical literacy demands that we think about all abilities and all ages. So that's a phrase we use in Canada, all abilities, all ages. And I just came from a school in Winnipeg where we had a child who had severe cerebral palsy. And he was in a wheelchair, powered, and he had an educational assistant. And I actually brought some tools with me, spinning plates. They're a circus thing. We throw a plate up and it spins and it goes on a plate. And the educational assistant took the child through all the other kids that were doing activities of circus. And I liked that, but then I saw this and I went, let me change something, a little thing. I took the spinning plate, I put the plate on it, and I gave it to the child in the wheelchair. Now he was participating, as opposed to watching. Then a bunch of the kids came over and said, hey, let's get some more plates in your hands. All of a sudden, the connection between children who didn't have that impairment and the kid that did happened. Wow. And that was magical. It was a moment was very special for everybody. And from there on in, even the last few weeks, the connection has changed. That's inclusion at its finest. Yeah. So to me, whether it's gender inclusion or people of different levels of ability, physical literacy is for all, not just for people who are enabled.
Yeah. I can see in the audience here there are some coaches. What can you say to sports club and coaches who wants to include this target group? Include this target group.
Oh yeah. Well, certainly creating levels of challenge for all levels of ability is the most important thing. And that's difficult. It is not trivial to think about all the different ways to include people. But if you think about it ahead of time, sometimes you can find ways to easily slip in a lot more people than you have before. I'm really happy to say around the world there's been lots of good examples of that. I could list them, but I think it's most important to realize you have to think it ahead of time and say, how do I modify my level of challenge for every level of ability?
Perfect. Please tell us a little about what happens at noon.
Oh, noon. Well, we're going to have a great chat for about an hour in a few more minutes from now on inclusive physical literacy and what does that look like in all the different categories that you mentioned. And for the past few days, we've been having great pep talks with professionals, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not 1,000, talking about this issue, including inclusivity. So for me, this is a really important topic because a culture that doesn't think about that is a culture that is pretty scary to be in.
Warm applause for Dean. Thank you.